This is just a little video about different kind of visual supports you can give to children in your settings. I just recently went to visit a setting and they had lots of different visual supports made up and weren't quite sure which to use first and how to use the different ones and how to do it so that they didn't overload the child that they were working with. So what I said to them is start with a visual timetable. So the very first thing, in fact, that you need to do is check that your child, the child that you're particularly thinking of, is actually relating real objects or real events to a picture. And if they're not, what you would use is in fact an object of reference. So another little chap within the same setting, the staff are showing him an actual nappy to prompt him that it's time to go and change nappy, or they're showing him a cup because it's going to be time for his drink and snack, or they're showing him, I think it might have been his shoes or a trainer or something like that, because it's going to be time to go outside. If your child is relating a picture to a particular event or toy, then the first thing that I would say is to begin by using a visual timetable. So break up your session into the parts that occur every day as part of your routine. So I've got one here. It's actually a home visual timetable that was made up for a parent. So it's the routine that they were going to follow from getting up until lunchtime. So get up, breakfast, wash and brush teeth, toys, playing with toys, play outside, and lunch. So that's obviously not everything that's going to happen in great detail during that morning, but it's some of the key things, and it's the things that they were going to keep as a kind of constant routine. And the way that that would be used, you can see that it's not a big visual timetable that you'd have up on a wall. I've made it so that it's one that can fold up and you can carry it around with you. Lots of places kind of have tabard style aprons with a big pocket, and you can put it in that so that it's always with you, but at least if it's portable, it can be, on a cupboard top or whatever, and you can grab it as soon as the child needs to transition from one thing to another. So on the other side, I've got a visual timetable that I had for a group time that I was doing, which always followed the same routine. So we would always start by saying hello, we'd sing, we'd play a game, we'd have a story, and then we'd be finished. And the way that I would use it in the group is I'd have a posting box, and as we finished particular things, so we had a hello routine, as that was finished, I would say hello is finished and post it in the box. And if you're working with an individual child, I think children quite like Velcro because there's a really nice sound as the item comes off. So the child might like to take the picture off the Velcro and put it in the posting box, and then they can really clearly see that the next thing on the timetable is whatever it is in your routine, in your setting. So a visual timetable, you would have it available, so on a cupboard top nearby so that you can grab it, or in a tabard pocket or whatever. You'd have it available, and every time the child is going to transition in, this sort of slightly more major way. So for example, at home, once getting up has finished and they're transitioning on to breakfast, you would actually take that off, or get the child to take that off and post it in the posting box, so that they can clearly see that for this period of time, that's finished, that's gone. The setting that I visited also had a little keyring of different pictures as well, and some of the pictures that they had on the keyring were the same as what they could have on the visual timetable, so things like snack time or nappy time or whatever. And I was suggesting that you use the visual timetable for the things that always happen in the routine, like going outside, maybe story time, that would be on your visual timetable. The keyring is also a really useful thing to have, but on that I would have perhaps particular toys that I was going to be directing the child to think about whether they wanted to go and play with them. So I've got just a little keyring style group of pictures of toys that a child might like to go and interact with. The other thing that you could put on something like this would be little behavioural prompts. So you might have a little picture which represents sit down, an instruction that you would give to prompt the child to sit down or to wait, or anything else that is relevant. So, you know, some little behavioural instructions that you can just quickly find the correct one and show it to them. So that's how I would use a kind of keyring in addition to the visual timetable. So also have that with me. You know, the keyring's often attached to you. You might have it on your person somewhere. And then the other thing that the setting that I visited had was also Now Next. So this is my Now Next board. It operates pretty much like a visual timetable, and you could use your visual timetable for this, but Now Next focuses the child on something that's going to happen and what's going to come afterwards. And usually the way that I've used it has been around helping a child accept something that they're less happy to do by letting them know that immediately after doing that, they're going to have something that they're more happy to do. So you can see that on my visual timetable, I'm showing them that now is toilet time. So now it's toilet time. Next, they're going to play with this favourite toy. So you're saying now toilet, next spinner, and you're choosing your language. Sometimes people use first, then. Sometimes people use first, next. We tend to use now, next. It doesn't matter so long as it's always consistent, and putting it on the board is just giving that extra visual input to go along with your words to help the child key into them and understand them and keep hold of them for that moment longer to process them. And then the last thing, well, actually there were a couple more things to think about. There was a large book of pictures, and the child was actually already choosing things that they wanted to do from this book. So I have a similar book which has my toys that I've taken photographs of in it on different pages. And I could use this book a little bit like the one that I saw being used in the setting that I visited the other day. So I could use this book so that I could give the little one that I was working with choices of things to do from here, and they could point out which toy they wanted. But I think, I mean, this book I just use for storing all my pictures, so you'll see that I've taken photographs of all my toys, so that I've always got my selection of photographs available to go alongside my toys. I don't tend to give any children that I'm working with sight of all of these toys all at once, partly because I probably never have them all with me, and partly because I think it would be a bit overwhelming. So I tend to select different pictures from a book like this, and I might use something a bit more like a choice board. So for example, this could operate as a choice board. I could just have a piece of card with these 3 pictures attached, and I could be giving the little one that I'm working with the choice of which one of these they want to do. I think if you're trying to introduce things, you definitely need to do it slowly. So I wouldn't suggest introducing a visual timetable, a keyring, and your now next board and a choice board all at one go. But these are all sort of tools in the toolbox and perfectly appropriate to use with children, but just think about how many you're using all at the same time, and move slowly with just slowly and gently through, making sure children are secure with each one, and think about which ones are most appropriate to your child right now. And then the last thing that we spoke about was PECS. So PECS stands for Picture Exchange Communication System, and it's a programme with 6 distinct phases. People often say that they're using PECS, and I always want to know which phase of PECS they're using, if it is PECS at all that they're using, because sometimes people say that they're using PECS and actually they're using a visual timetable, or they're using visual support. But picture exchange communication is very much what it says. A child is exchanging a picture and gaining an activity, or possibly a piece of food sometimes as well. So in order to gain the activity that they desire, they're giving a picture to an adult in the same way that they might give a word. So they might say the word bubbles if they were verbal, they might say the word bubbles, and they might gain the activity of bubbles. The adult might blow them some bubbles. Because they're not using their words in that way, so PECS is relevant for children who are pre-verbal or who aren't using words in that way of asking for something, then you might introduce them to PECS so that they're giving you a picture instead of giving you a word. So that the way that you would start to do it is you would find an activity that child is motivated by. So bubbles would be one. So I might get my bubbles and get my picture of bubbles. And the way that I would need to do it is I would need another person with me to sit behind the child, so that as the person to whom the child would give the picture, I would probably begin by showing the bubbles, and the child would hopefully want those bubbles and might reach towards them. They might reach to me to get the bubbles. And the person sitting with the child or sitting behind the child, as the child reaches, they might get the child's other hand, and I would often do it at a table so that the child could be prompted to slide the picture across to me. So the person facilitating who's sitting with the child might pop the child's hand on top of that picture and slide it towards me. And I would then pick up the picture and say, "You want bubbles?" And I would blow the bubbles. And then I'd put the lid back on and I'd hang on to it, tighten my hand. And as the child's reaching towards me again and trying to get the bubbles, that supporting adult would just prompt them to slide the picture across again. And I would pick the picture up and say, "You want bubbles?" And I'd blow them again. And we'd keep repeating that. We'd keep repeating that action. Each time I'd put the lid back on the bubbles and I would, not be blowing anymore until I received that picture again. We'd keep repeating it until hopefully the child, if they're ready for PECS, after lots of repetition, hopefully they begin to slide that picture across to me themselves. So that's the very beginning of PECS for you to have a think about. As I've said, there are 6 distinct phases of PECS, and it's important to work your way through them and be aware of where you're going with it. So people have often, sometimes parents have bought from the internet something like this, a PECS folder, and it's got kind of the one of the last phases of PECS on the front of it, which is the sentence strip and the small pictures, and people kind of want to get to that point because they've bought this item, but in fact using the file is something that you're not beginning to do for a few phases yet, and you don't necessarily have to use tiny pictures either. You can see that the one that I tend to start with is a bit bigger. People often store their pictures inside a PECS folder, and then often it gets a little bit confused